Hello, welcome to the Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. This video is going to be about a game format for Age of Sigmar, which I talked about on a previous video a few days ago. Now, I need to put some caveats in before we go any deeper, because we are going to be talking about playing, using the pros and cons of the Highlander list format. And I'll go into all of the details in a moment, but I'd like to start out right now that no one is coming for your toys to smash your models or your army lists, or this is the correct and most best way to play. This is just a discussion about maybe some ways that we can make the game a little bit more interesting, make the game a little bit more diverse, and a bunch of other stuff. But we do have pros and cons, right? And yes, and if you would like to, on my Patreon, I do have a deep dive into the Highlander cinematic universe, which we will be going into later. We'll be watching several versions of the Highlander movie on stream, where I'm recording now, which we've done before we got this. But this is mainly to do with competitive Age of Sigmar. I am also, don't listen to these guys who are saying that I am coming for your toys. I'm not, right? I am also going to run an event under this format in the future here at the TSN Arena in Nottingham, because I think it's at least interesting. Let's start out with where this originally comes from, because this isn't my idea. This is a very common thing that's happened in Age of Sigmar and Old World and a bunch of other game systems in the past. So this isn't my idea. I'm just talking about it, okay? And the reason that I'm talking about it today is because we featured an event yesterday where Highlander was something that was being played at one of the events, and they had a slightly different format for it. And shout out to Tyler, who messaged me about it yesterday, or left a comment yesterday about it. But also because doing the stat show every single Monday until we see battle scroll updates, I feel like I can normally start to pick which units you're going to see played from different armies, because those are the most efficient units. And in some cases, those units you see multiple times, at which point you and other people at home, or maybe people you've seen, it might not be you, I don't want to tie you with that brush, you'll start using the word spam. I want to start out with, I don't believe spam is real. Spam is where you would take multiple instances of the same unit, right? Because they are the most efficient choice. Like you might, you might have multiples of a similar unit, but we never have in Age of Sigmar, because the units are too expensive, enough points to really spam units correctly. We never have that. But the idea of spam is because when you see is normally because the idea of spam, or maybe the concept of spam, or maybe, the feeling that something is spam is to do with your feelings. I have a little chart here to explain what I'm talking about. So normally when a unit is rubbish, and you take lots of it, it's a theme, okay? So its strength is very low. But when a unit is good and it has a high strength, it becomes spam. This is a feelings-based chart, okay? Is the thing rubbish? Oh, I feel like it's just a theme, okay? Lots of doom wheels. But is the thing too good? Lots of rot guts. But in this example, rot guts, there's only the rot gut lists that we normally see. There's only 3 units of 6. It's not necessarily a spam. The rule of 3 wouldn't stop that being a unit. As an example, if we look at Lumineth Realm Lords, who are very competitive now, or Nighthaunt, who are very competitive, before the battle scroll update, you would have 3 units of 10 hex wraiths. It's not spam. It's just 3 units of hex wraiths. Okay, and Age of Sigmar 4 is much, much broader in list writing and your ability to take whatever you like than it's ever been in the past. Okay, so I just want to be really clear. Spam, I don't think is real. I don't think spam is a real thing, at least in Age of Sigmar. Okay, cool. Now we are going to go and talk about what Highlander format is, because I've done a lot of talking before that. Okay, Highlander format is, in my opinion, this. Okay, the rules are you can only have 1 instance of a war scroll. So, you can only have 1 unit of Vanguard. And then the second rule is the single instance of war scroll may be reinforced or not following the normal rules. So obviously you can reinforce a unit of Vanguard, but you can only have 1 Nagash, and you can't reinforce Nagash. Obviously, that makes sense. Okay, so it's really simple. Okay, and we're going to go through the pros and cons of this in a moment. Before we go through the pros and cons, let's talk about the intent. Why would we even want to do this to our list writing? What would be the purpose. The intent here, as I've said it, to make you the community, your friends or the people online feel, not actually make it happen, but feel that lists and also the wider game is more diverse. Okay, it is not to balance any perceived issues with the metagame, but instead to make quirky internal balance choices more likely to be seen at the table. That's it. And it might not result in that, right? Ultimately, the last line, the intent is for it to be fun. Now, that should actually be your intent with all of your wargaming, that bottom line, for it to be fun, right? Pretty much. It should be an enjoyable experience that you enjoy, right? But some people love screeching this online, which is dumb, and don't do that, okay? Because it doesn't make any sense, all right? So stop saying that, right? Or that's garbaggio, it's a different word. But this, the idea here, right, is to make it feel like it's a little bit more interesting. And honestly, as someone who likes list writing and as someone who is really interested in really exciting list writing, I think it's fair to say Age of Sigmar 4 list writing isn't particularly thrilling. Like, you are locked by which units you can take because of certain heroes. As an example, you normally don't have enough points that you're building lots of different regiments. Many of the armies of renown are pretty garbaggio. And unfortunately, many of the regiments of renown aren't particularly interesting either. And the ones that are really good are perceived to be too good, like the Saviors of Cinderfall, so they don't overly work. So the problem is that the feeling that people have about building their armies, and also my personal perception about building the armies, is that it's not overly interesting. And importantly, the internal balance of Age of Sigmar armies is pretty whack. It's very difficult to argue for many units in the Slaves to Darkness roster when Varangard and Chosen exist, as an example. And many of the armies and rosters really do struggle with their internal balance, where many of the units are these are just the best units you can take. And so you will take the best units you can take. Okay, so that's the intent. The intent is to make it more fun and to make you feel like list writing is more interesting and diverse. Okay, and this can be run at an event or at your local club with your friends. Let's talk about the pros and cons of this. Pro, more diverse games due to you playing different units. So instead of you needing to go, you've got your 2 units of whatever, right? You can go and choose that other little fringe unit that maybe you've not tried before. It might also mean you might learn some new tricks on the table. You might put that new unit on the table and be like, I've never tried this before. And then you're like, actually, that wasn't that bad. Actually, that worked pretty well. That's how I felt about Sylvaneth as an example. I was like, Sylvaneth, pretty garbage, but I played him at an event, and now I'm a bit of a Sylvaneth stan. I'm like, yeah, they've got play. Like, you got to roll some 4-ups. It's a little bit harder. Like, it's not necessarily brilliant, but I think they're good. Like, and I think you can play with them, so they're not like absolutely DOA they're not dead on arrival. So I think that they're pretty fun. So I quite like that. And putting those units on the table and trying them out for the first time might actually make them really good. So I think that's a pro. You can own a more diverse collection of models. That's really nice. It means you don't have to just go and buy the same unit 30 times or whatever it might be. You don't need to have, 120 Witch Elves. Instead, you could have some Doomfire Warlocks as an example and really spread out your collection. You get to use models you may not usually use, which we talked about already, which I think is really good. Games Workshop specifically don't want you to play this way. And I've said this many times before, and I'll say this again. Age of Sigmar is a punk game. Age of Sigmar was a game released by Games Workshop, and it was a fucking disaster. It was terrible. The community came together. They built points, missions you still play today, and a bunch of other stuff, which eventually Games Workshop co-opted and repackaged and sold to you as the General's Handbook. But Age of Sigmar has always had a punk DIY aesthetic that we have always, as the community, done stuff with. Like last year or last edition, we just started doing terrain rules and maps, and Games Workshop now have adopted that because it's the right thing to do and it makes loads of sense, right? So there we go. So Games Workshop doesn't want you to play this way, probably means it's a good way to play. You get to use more models, and it's much more fun list writing, in my opinion. a little bit more interesting, a little bit more spicy. Yes, you can still run Be'lakor, 10 shows, and 6 Varangard in this format, and that's an incredibly competitive list. But if we scroll back up, this format is not to balance any perceived issues. It's not to do that. Games Workshop should do that. It's to make the fun stuff happen. That's it. Cons. Doesn't remove efficient picks enough, as I've just talked about with my list example. Doesn't remove units that are too good from the game. You can still have 20 Sentinels if you want to. You can still have Severith and a Wind Fox, if you would like. And 20 Sentinels and 10 of the Kangaroo Riders. You can still do all of that if you want. So it doesn't affect efficient units enough. That should be a balance update. This isn't intended as a balance update. Some factions barely have enough units for a Highlander list. That's really true. That's really, really true. Armies like, Kharadron Overlords or Einar Deepkin as an example. But they do have enough. Daughters of Cain, but Daughters of Cain do have enough. They all have enough, right, to run a diverse roster if they want to. And if you have a Regiment of Renown, if the Regiments of Renown were better, you can always bring one of those in as well to really, diversify those lists as well. But yes, some armies don't have tons of options. Some have too many. Next point, Robbie's trying to ruin Age of Sigmar. That's a classic con. Shout out to all my Reddit fans for dropping that one in there. And, wherever else I've been writing about, wherever you're writing this or wherever you're saying that I'm trying to destroy the game, there's your con in there for you. Also inappropriate from the clock debacle. That's funny. Increased mental load due to more scrolls to remember, and also fewer war scrolls is easier for new players, are both cons of this system, and I super agree with that. I really do agree. I think one of the strengths of Age of Sigmar, current Age of Sigmar and current 40k, and I said this and I should say this again, one of the massive strengths about both these two things is that it's super easy for new people to play. They can pick an army up, they can get a bunch of models together. There's not too many model rules on the different war scrolls. You can take multiples of the same war scroll, especially if you like that war scroll. If you're I absolutely love how Rock Guts look, I can just take loads of them. You're great, lovely. I don't have to think too much. That's fantastic. So that is a con from this system where you might have tons of different units doing loads of little bits that you have to remember. And the mental load of that or being more difficult for new players is a problem. However, I'm talking about a format which you can occasionally play to make it more interesting, probably for people who've been playing more and more. People who've been playing lots, this makes a little bit of system, a little bit of a challenge. Also, a big challenge for competitive players. They've already played 5 GTs during this version of Age of Sigmar 4. They're out there, they're grinding games, they're playing on TTS every week. A Highlander format gives them something more interesting to play inside of. And then lastly, it does not stop Gargants from being able to play, because you can still play Gargants in a Highlander format. And I hate that. Because you can just have Brod, you can have a Gatebreaker, you can have, whatever the other ones are, which I hate, which is all of them. A Beast Smasher, as an example. And that's it, right? So what I would like to know now is what you think about this. What you as a community, what you as a people who watch my YouTube videos, I've already been talking about it with people who watch my Twitch chat, which I do Monday to Friday, 11 a.m. UK time to 1 p.m. UK time. Every week, you should come join me. We've already talked about it. We've already had this conversation. So now in the comments below, it's time for you to have your conversation. It's time to tell me what list you think you would like to play. I think we could have a really fun day. Just writing Highlander lists on stream, and that could be really fun, and just seeing what they look like and why they would be interesting. But it's up to you. Now, some people have made this an optional format where if you run a Highlander list at an event, you get a trophy, like we saw at an event yesterday, which I think is super cool. In the future, would having an event where it was enforced and every list had to be a Highlander format, would that be really interesting? Would this actually be really good just for the game as a whole? There are so many big question marks I have that I would love to read your comments about it and see what you think. I personally think this would be nice to have as an additional format, and looking at other game systems, like we just talked about League of Legends a moment ago. Magic's also another good example with Commander. Having a system that's maybe a little bit more engaging for casual players. For instance, hey, I'd like to play at the club at the weekend. Would you like to play Highlander mode? You'd be like, that's cool. That would be a fun and interesting way to play, and that'd be a little bit more interesting. But you don't have to do it. It's an optional thing, and I think that actually ends up being really good. So let me know what you think. Thanks for listening. See you soon. Thanks for watching Honest Wargamer. Goodbye.